General Cove was a factory overseer on a forge world in the Segmentum Pacificus. 43 years old. Married. 2 children. A loyal servant of the Omnicia who'd spent his entire adult life managing manufacturum output for the Adeptus Mechanicus. He made one mistake. During a shift rotation, Cove authorized a production delay. Not abandoning work. Not sabotage. Just slowing the line for 6 hours so his workers could sleep. They'd been running 30-hour shifts for 3 weeks. People were collapsing, dying at their stations, falling into machinery. Cove thought 6 hours wouldn't matter. The quota could be adjusted. Production would resume. Nobody would notice. The Mechanicus noticed. 2 tech priests arrived at his quarters that night. No warning. No trial. Just a notification. Cove had been found guilty of production disruption. Sentenced to servitor conversion. Effective immediately. He tried to explain. Tried to tell them about the workers dying. About the unsustainable pace. About the fact that dead workers produce nothing. The tech priests didn't care. Dead workers could be replaced. Production delays could not. Cove's authorization had cost the Forge world 6 hours of output. Thousands of shells unmanufactured. Dozens of weapons incomplete. That was unacceptable. The sentence stood. They took him that night. Dragged him from his family. His wife screamed. His children cried. Cove begged. Promised he'd never delay production again. Offered to work extra shifts. To do anything. The tech priests were emotionless. Not cruel. Not angry. Just efficient. Cove was a resource that had malfunctioned. Now he would be repurposed into a resource that couldn't malfunction. They brought him to the conversion facility. Strapped him to a surgical table. Injected him with chemicals that paralyzed his body but left his mind conscious. Aware. Able to feel everything. A tech priest leaned over him. Explained the process. Not out of cruelty. Just standard protocol. Informing the subject what would happen. Your higher brain functions will be removed. Memory. Personality. Emotion. What remains will be sufficient for simple tasks. You'll understand basic commands. Perform assigned duties. Nothing more. Cove tried to scream. Couldn't. The paralytic had locked his jaw. Frozen his vocal cords. All he could do was watch as they activated the surgical servitors. Your body will be modified. Augmented. Made useful. Your arms may be replaced with tool appendages. Your legs with treads or nothing if mobility isn't required. Your organs will be enhanced or removed depending on function. The servitors moved closer. Began positioning cranial drills. You'll remain conscious during some of this. The lobotomization process requires feedback. We need to know when we've removed enough brain tissue. Too little and you retain personality. Too much and you're non-functional. The drill touched his skull. Started spinning. The Omnicia wastes nothing. Your body will serve. Your mind will serve. You'll be more useful than you were. More reliable. More obedient. This is mercy. This is redemption through purpose. Cove felt the drill break through bone. Felt pressure inside his skull. Felt something fundamental being cut away. Piece by piece. Memory by memory. Thought by thought. He tried to hold on. Tried to remember his wife's name. His children's faces. His own name. Who he was. Why this was happening. Gone. All of it. Slipping away as the drill carved through his brain. Leaving only base function. Enough to understand commands. Enough to operate machinery. Nothing more. The person named General Cove ceased to exist. What remained was Servitor Unit 7743 Gamma. Assigned to manufactory line oversight. Standing in one position for 18 hours a day. Watching production. Reporting deviations. Never questioning. Never stopping. Never thinking beyond immediate function. His wife was informed he'd been executed for production disruption. His children were told their father had betrayed the Omnicia. His name was removed from all records. His existence erased. But the servitor that used to be General Cove still worked the factory floor. Still stood in the same building where he'd once been overseer. Sometimes his wife walked past. Didn't recognize him. How could she? He looked like a machine now. And maybe that's mercy. Maybe not knowing is better than realizing the thing monitoring production used to be your husband. Used to be a person. Used to have thoughts and memories and dreams. Now it just had functions. This is what the Adeptus Mechanicus does. Every day. On every forge world. Converting humans into biological machinery. Not killing them. Not destroying them. Repurposing them. Making them useful in ways that serve the Omnisia's purposes. They call it servitor conversion. The process of transforming a human being into a servitor. A lobotomized slave. A biological robot that still breathes. Still bleeds but no longer thinks. And they do this millions of times. Billions, maybe, across the entire Imperium. So many servitors that they're just background. Part of the environment. Like furniture. Like equipment. Nobody questions it. Because in the Imperium's logic, this is efficient. This is practical. This is how you extract maximum utility from every resource, including humans who've become inconvenient. If this kind of systematic horror is why you're here, examining how the Imperium actually functions, hit that like button. Your engagement tells the algorithm this content matters. Let me show you what servitors actually are. And why the Mechanicus needs so many of them that humans have become their primary resource. A servitor looks almost human. At first glance. From a distance. If you don't look too closely. They stand like humans. Move like humans, mostly. Have human features. Human proportions. You can tell they were human once. But get closer and the differences become obvious. The vacant eyes. The slack expression. The way they move with mechanical precision. The augmentations. Servitors are cyborgs. Humans with mechanical components replacing or enhancing biological ones. But they're not like space marines or tech priests who augment themselves while retaining their humanity. Servitors have no humanity left. Just biological components. A brain reduced to base function. A body converted into a platform for whatever tools the Mechanicus needs. The brain is the critical part. A servitor's brain has been lobotomized, surgically altered, large portions removed or disconnected. What remains is just enough to maintain basic life functions and process simple commands. They can understand orders. Pick up that crate. Move to Station 7. Activate this mechanism. They'll obey. Immediately. Without question. Without thought. But they can't think beyond the command. Can't adapt to unexpected situations. Can't make decisions. Can't solve problems. They're biological automatons. Flesh robots programmed through brain surgery instead of code. The lobotomization isn't uniform. Depends on the servitor's intended function. A servitor meant to operate machinery needs different brain capacity than one meant to carry equipment or one meant to perform calculations. The Mechanicus has refined this over 10,000 years. Knows exactly which parts of the brain to remove for each function, how much to leave intact, where to cut to achieve maximum utility with minimum waste. It's precision butchery, applied science in service of efficiency. And it works. Servitors are reliable, obedient, incapable of rebellion or negligence or any behavior that might disrupt their assigned tasks. The body modifications depend on purpose. Some servitors look almost unchanged, still have their original limbs, original faces. You might pass one on the street and only notice something's wrong from their vacant stare and mechanical movements. These are usually domestic servitors, assigned to simple tasks, cleaning, carrying, basic maintenance. They don't need heavy augmentation because their work doesn't require it. But many servitors are heavily modified, arms replaced with tools, welding torches, lifting mechanisms, weapon mounts, whatever their function requires, legs replaced or removed entirely. Some servitors don't need mobility. They're bolted to a single station. Their legs are waste, so the Mechanicus removes them, uses the resources elsewhere. Organs replaced with mechanical equivalents. More efficient, more reliable. A servitor doesn't need a full digestive system, just enough to convert nutrient paste into energy. Everything else is unnecessary. sensory organs modified or removed. A servitor working in a toxic environment doesn't need natural lungs. One operating in darkness doesn't need normal eyes. One performing repetitive tasks doesn't need a sense of touch beyond what's necessary for the task. The Mechanicus strips away everything that isn't functionally required, reduces the human body to its essential components, replaces or enhances what remains, creates something that's technically still alive but barely recognizable as human. The horror is that they're still conscious. Not fully, not in any meaningful way, but there's awareness, some fragment of consciousness that persists even after the lobotomization. Some part that still experiences existence. Servitors feel pain, reduced pain, dulled by the brain damage and chemical treatments, but pain nonetheless. They just can't respond to it meaningfully, can't cry out, can't seek help, can't even really process what they're feeling. They feel exhaustion. Their bodies get tired, muscles fatigue, organs strain, but they don't stop unless commanded to stop. They work until they collapse, until something breaks, until they physically cannot continue. And somewhere in what remains of their consciousness, they register this, experience it, exist in a state of perpetual discomfort without the cognitive ability to understand why or how to make it stop. Some tech priests argue servitors don't suffer because they lack the brain function to process suffering as suffering. That pain without the emotional context of pain isn't really pain. That awareness without self-awareness isn't consciousness. Maybe, or maybe it's just convenient to believe that, easier than acknowledging what they're doing to millions of humans across the Imperium. The Mechanicus has different categories of servitors. Gun servitors, humans with heavy weapons mounted where their arms used to be, used as mobile weapon platforms, standing guard, defending facilities, fighting in combat zones where their deaths are acceptable. Labor servitors, the most common type, performing manual work, lifting, carrying, operating machinery, doing all the repetitive physical tasks that the Mechanicus needs done but doesn't want to waste trained personnel on. Tech servitors, enhanced with specialized tools, welding equipment, cutting lasers, repair mechanisms, assigned to maintenance and construction tasks requiring specific capabilities. Medici servitors, performing basic medical procedures, not surgery, not complex care, just simple treatments, wound cleaning, chemical injection, patient monitoring, tasks that need precision but not judgment. Servo skulls, not full servitors, just skulls. Human skulls with the brain removed and replaced with simple programming. Augmented with anti-grav units and basic sensors. Used for surveillance, recording, message delivery. The Mechanicus has hundreds of specialized categories, each designed for specific functions, each representing a human who was converted into biological machinery for that purpose. The scale is what makes this truly horrifying. Servitors aren't rare, aren't unusual. Every Forge world has millions, maybe billions depending on the world's size and production demands. Every Mechanicus facility uses them extensively. Every tech priest above a certain rank has personal servitors. And it's not just the Mechanicus. The wider Imperium uses servitors everywhere. Imperial Guard regiments, noble households, administratum offices, ecclesiarchy cathedrals, inquisitorial fortresses. Anywhere humans need reliable labor without the complications of human emotion or judgment, servitors are there, working, serving, existing in their diminished state. Everywhere. The Imperium produces more servitors annually than it produces tanks, more than it produces aircraft, possibly more than it produces weapons, because servitors are the foundation of Imperial infrastructure, the machinery that makes everything else possible. And every single one used to be human, used to have a name, a life, thoughts, dreams, memories, all of that stripped away, replaced with function, converted into usefulness. This is what the Adeptus Mechanicus does, what it's been doing for 10,000 years, converting humans into servitors, systematically, efficiently, on a scale so massive that it's become normalized. Background. Something nobody questions. But somebody has to be converted. Millions of somebodies. Every year. Every world. Constantly feeding the Mechanicus' need for biological machinery. Who becomes servitors? Where do these humans come from? Who decides that this person gets to keep their humanity while that person becomes a lobotomized slave? Let me show you the selection process, the criteria, the systematic harvesting of humans for conversion into servitors. The official answer is simple: criminals. The Imperium has laws. Break them and you face punishment. Minor infractions get fines or labor service. Major crimes get execution. But there's a middle category. Crimes serious enough to warrant permanent punishment but not serious enough to justify wasting the body through death. Those criminals become servitors. It's presented as mercy. You committed a crime. You owe a debt to society. Rather than killing you, the Imperium allows you to serve, to contribute, to redeem yourself through useful labor. Just without your mind, without your identity, without anything that made you human except the biological components. This sounds reasonable on the surface. Justice, rehabilitation through service, making criminals productive rather than simply eliminating them. Except the definition of crime is flexible, very flexible, and the Mechanicus needs a lot of servitors, more than actual criminals could ever provide. So the definition expands. Debt is a common pathway to servitor conversion. In the Imperium, owing money isn't just a financial problem. It's a moral failing, an offense against the social order. If you can't pay your debts, you're stealing from your creditors. That's a crime. And crimes have consequences. A worker on a hive world falls behind on their habunit fees. Can't pay. The debt accumulates. Interest compounds. Within months, they owe more than they'll ever earn. The Arbites arrive. Arrest them for debt evasion. The sentence? Servitor conversion. A merchant fails. Business collapses. Can't repay the loans that kept them operating. The creditors file criminal charges. Debt fraud. Theft by insolvency. The merchant becomes a servitor. A family member gets sick. Medical treatment costs more than the family has. They borrow. Can't repay. The debt passes to the children when the parents die. The children, now responsible for debt they didn't create, face conversion. This creates a system where economic failure becomes criminal, where poverty itself is punishable by lobotomization, where the Mechanicus has a constant supply of criminals who are really just people who couldn't pay their bills. Political dissent is another major source. The Imperium doesn't tolerate questioning, doesn't allow criticism. Suggesting that imperial policy might be flawed? That's heresy. Organizing workers to demand better conditions? That's sedition. Speaking against a planetary governor? That's treason. All of these are crimes, all punishable. And when execution would create martyrs, when killing dissidents might inspire more dissent, servitor conversion is convenient. The dissident disappears. Nobody knows what happened. Maybe executed. Maybe imprisoned. Maybe shipped off-world. The Imperium doesn't clarify, just removes the problem. The dissident becomes a servitor, works in the same factories they once criticized, serves the same system they spoke against, can't speak anymore, can't think anymore, can't inspire anyone because they're not a person anymore. It's efficient suppression, and it generates useful resources from people who were otherwise just problems. Then there are the convenient disappearances. A tech priest needs servitors for a project, requires specific body types, specific capabilities, specific numbers. The official channels are slow. Paperwork takes months. Criminal trials take time. But there are always people nobody will miss. Underhive dwellers, vagrants, refugees, people without documentation or family or anyone who'd notice if they vanished. The tech priest sends servitors to collect them. Not officially, not with warrants or legal authority. Just collection, rounding up the convenient, the disposable, the humans who exist in the cracks of imperial society. They're brought to conversion facilities, processed, transformed into the servitors the tech priest needed. Nobody files reports. Nobody investigates. Nobody cares. Because these people were already invisible, already outside the system, already effectively non-people in the Imperium's eyes. Converting them just formalizes their status. This happens constantly, on every world with a significant Mechanicus presence. Thousands of people disappearing, becoming servitors, with no record, no trial, no paperwork, just efficient resource acquisition. Children are not exempt. The Imperium has orphans, lots of them, war orphans, disaster orphans, children whose parents died to debt or disease or any of the million ways people die in the Imperium. Most get absorbed into the system somehow. Scola progenium if they're lucky. Labor gangs if they're not. Starvation if they're unlucky. But some become servitors. Young servitors. Their brains still developing. Easier to modify. More plastic. Better for certain types of conversion that require specific cognitive functions. The Mechanicus doesn't prefer children. Adult bodies are stronger. More durable. Better for heavy labor. But children have advantages for specialized roles. Particularly computational servitors. Ones that need to process data rather than perform physical work. So orphanages on Forge worlds are also recruitment centers. Not officially. Not in any documented way. But when a tech priest needs a specific type of servitor, when adult conversions won't work, orphans disappear. Nobody investigates missing orphans. Nobody questions where they went. The Imperium has bigger problems than tracking children nobody wanted. Failed aspirants are another source. Space Marine chapters recruit aspirants. Young candidates who undergo trials. Most fail. Die during the testing. That's expected. Part of the selection process. But some fail in ways that leave them alive but damaged. Injuries that prevent further trials but don't kill. Psychological breaks that make them unsuitable for military service but leave them physically capable. These failed aspirants become servitors. Not all chapters do this. Some kill failed aspirants as mercy. Some return them to their homeworlds. Some find other uses for them. But many chapters, particularly those with close Mechanicus ties, hand failed aspirants to the tech priests. Bodies enhanced by initial augmentations. Partially transformed by the early stages of Space Marine creation. Valuable resources. The aspirants signed their lives over when they volunteered. Accepted that they'd serve the Emperor in whatever capacity he required. If they failed to become Space Marines, they'd serve as something else. Servitors. Still serving. Still useful. Just without minds or agency or any memory of what they'd hoped to become. The Mechanicus also converts its own. Tech priests who fail. Who make errors. Who question doctrine or demonstrate insufficient devotion to the Omnicia. Who become liabilities rather than assets. They don't get trials. Don't get second chances. Just conversion. Immediate. Efficient. Transforming a failed tech priest into a servitor that won't fail because it can't think enough to fail. This serves multiple purposes. Punishment. Deterrent for other tech priests. Resource reclamation. And elimination of potential problems before they spread. A tech priest who doubts the Omnicia is dangerous. Might spread that doubt. Might contaminate others. Conversion stops the spread. Removes the doubt by removing the capacity for thought. And it's reversible. Technically, the lobotomization can be undone. Sort of. With enough skill and resources, a tech priest could restore higher brain function to a servitor. This is used as a threat. Behave and you remain yourself. Fail and you become a servitor. But only temporarily. Prove yourself in servitor form and maybe you'll be restored. It almost never happens. Restoration is difficult. Expensive. Usually unsuccessful. But the possibility exists. Just barely. Just enough to make the threat more psychologically effective. Quotas make everything worse. Forge worlds have production requirements. They need to produce equipment, weapons, vehicles. All of it requires labor. Human labor. Servitor labor. The Mechanicus calculates exactly how many servitors each Forge world needs to meet its quotas. then it requires planetary governments to provide that many conversions. Annually, no exceptions. This creates pressure. If crime doesn't generate enough criminals, the planet must find other sources. If debtors aren't sufficient, expand the definition of debt. If dissidents are rare, lower the threshold for dissent. The quota must be met. The Mechanicus doesn't accept excuses, doesn't care about local circumstances, doesn't want explanations, just bodies, sufficient numbers, on schedule. So planetary governors get creative. They create laws designed to generate criminals. Impossible standards that ensure regular violations. Taxes set too high to pay. Requirements nobody can meet. Not because they want to punish their populations. Because they need to meet the servitor quota. Because failing to deliver means the Mechanicus starts taking people without asking permission. Starts treating the entire planet as a source of raw materials. Better to control the selection yourself. Choose who gets converted. Manage the process. At least maintain the illusion that law matters. The selection is never random. Even when quotas force arbitrary criminalization, even when the Mechanicus just needs bodies, there's always selection bias. Some people are more likely to become servitors than others. The poor, the powerless, people without connections, without money, without families who'd make trouble if they disappeared. The Mechanicus doesn't convert nobles, doesn't convert merchants with influence, doesn't convert anyone who matters to anyone who has power. Converts people who won't be missed, who can't fight back, who don't have advocates or lawyers or anyone who'd question their disappearance. This is never stated openly, never written into law, but everyone understands how it works. Wealth is protection. Power is immunity. Being poor and invisible is vulnerability. And the Mechanicus needs millions of vulnerable people. Constantly, forever, feeding the endless demand for servitors. So the vulnerable are harvested. Systematically, legally when possible, conveniently when necessary, efficiently always. And nobody with the power to stop it wants to stop it. Because the Imperium needs servitors. Needs the labor they provide. Needs the economic efficiency they represent. The alternative is using actual humans. Paying them. Training them. Dealing with their emotions and needs and demands. Accepting that human labor has limits. Servitors have no limits. No needs except fuel. No demands except commands. No emotions that complicate management. They're perfect workers. As long as you don't think about where they come from. As long as you don't acknowledge what they used to be. As long as you maintain the comfortable fiction that they're machines rather than lobotomized humans. The Imperium maintains that fiction easily. Has maintained it for 10,000 years. Will maintain it until something forces a reckoning. But that reckoning would require acknowledging the horror. Confronting what's being done. Admitting that the systematic enslavement of human minds might be wrong. And the Imperium can't afford that admission. Can't function without servitors. Can't maintain its infrastructure or production or military without the labor servitors provide. So the harvesting continues. The conversions continue. And millions of humans keep disappearing into the Mechanicus's facilities. Let me show you what happens to them there. The actual process. The systematic destruction of everything that makes someone human. The conversion facilities don't look like prisons. Don't look like torture chambers. They look like factories. Clean, organized, efficient. Because that's what they are. Factories. Converting one type of resource into another. Raw humans into finished servitors. Assembly line processing applied to consciousness destruction. The process begins with intake. Subjects arrive restrained, usually unconscious or heavily sedated. Not out of mercy, just practicality. Conscious subjects struggle. Struggling subjects damage themselves or the equipment. Sedation is efficient. They're cataloged. Physical measurements recorded. Body scanned. Health assessed. Medical history reviewed if available. The Mechanicus needs to know what they're working with. What modifications will be required? What complications might arise? Each subject is assigned a conversion track. Depends on body type, age, physical condition, intended function. Not all servitors are created equal. Different roles require different modifications. Different amounts of brain tissue preserved or removed. The subject is given a designation, not a name, an alphanumeric code, serial number. From this point forward, that's their identity. The person they were becomes irrelevant. Only the resource matters. Then comes preparation. The subject is stripped, cleaned, any non-essential items removed. Jewelry, implants, tattoos lasered off if they might interfere with augmentation points. The body must be clean, ready for modification. Chemical preparation follows. Injections. For lines. Solutions that prepare the body for surgery. Anti-rejection drugs. Immunosuppressants. Compounds that make tissue more receptive to augmentation. And chemicals that affect consciousness. Not anesthesia. Not exactly. Paralytics that freeze the body while leaving the mind aware. The subject can't move, can't speak, can't even blink. But they can feel, can perceive, can understand what's happening. This is intentional. The Mechanicus needs feedback during the lobotomization. Needs to know when they've removed enough brain tissue. Too much and the servitor is non-functional. Too little and personality remains. Consciousness provides that feedback. The lobotomization is the critical step. The subject is positioned on a surgical table. Head locked in a stabilization frame. Can't move. Can't look away. Forced to stare upward at the surgical equipment descending toward them. Tech priests and surgical servitors gather around. Efficient. Experienced. They've done this thousands of times. This subject is just another unit in today's production quota. The cranial drill activates. High-pitched whine. Vibration. The subject feels it touch their skull. Feels pressure. Feels the drill bit begin to bore through bone. There's no pain yet. The skull has no pain receptors. But the sensation is horrifying anyway. The sound. The vibration. The knowledge of what's happening. What's about to happen. The drill breaks through. Into the cranial cavity. The sound changes. The pressure changes. The subject can feel something inside their skull that shouldn't be there. The first incision into brain tissue is when pain begins. The brain itself has no pain receptors, but the surrounding tissue does. The meninges, the blood vessels, and when the surgical tools start cutting, when they begin removing tissue, those structures respond. It's not conventional pain, more like pressure, wrongness, a sensation that something fundamental is being violated. The subject can't identify what they're feeling, just knows it's wrong, deeply wrong, and they're conscious through all of it, aware, feeling their own mind being cut apart, experiencing their thoughts becoming confused, their memories fragmenting, their identity dissolving. The tech priests monitor responses, neural activity measured through implanted sensors. They're looking for specific patterns, signs that higher functions are degrading, that personality is being destroyed while basic capability remains. They remove sections methodically. The prefrontal cortex goes first, the part responsible for personality, decision-making, complex thought, everything that makes someone an individual. The subject feels this as loss, not physical sensation, conceptual loss. They try to remember their name and can't. Try to recall their family and find nothing. Try to think about who they are and discover that question no longer has meaning. But they're still aware, still experiencing the dissolution, just without the cognitive capacity to process what they're experiencing. It's horror without the ability to conceptualize horror. Memory centers are next. The hippocampus, the temporal lobes, all the structures that store and retrieve memory. The tech priests carve them out carefully, precisely, removing autobiographical memory while preserving procedural memory. The servitor needs to remember how to walk, how to use hands, how to operate equipment, basic motor skills and learned procedures, but not who taught them those skills, not why they learned them, not anything that connects the skill to personal history. The subject experiences this as erasure, their entire life vanishing. childhood, adolescence, adulthood, everything they've ever experienced just gone, inaccessible, deleted. Some subjects panic at this point, try to hold on, try to remember something, anything, but the panic itself is being removed. The ability to panic, the emotional capacity that makes panic possible. Emotional centers follow, the amygdala, the limbic system, everything that generates emotion, fear, joy, sadness, anger, love, all of it systematically excised. What remains is something that experiences sensation but not feeling, perceives but doesn't care, exists without any emotional context for existence. This is considered ideal for servitors. Emotions compromise efficiency, make subjects unreliable. A servitor that feels fear might hesitate. One that feels pain might stop working. One that feels anything might remember it's human. Better to remove the capacity entirely. The tech priests leave specific structures intact. The brainstem controls basic life functions, breathing, heartbeat, sleep-wake cycles. Remove that and the servitor dies. Useless. The cerebellum coordinates movement, balance, motor control. A servitor needs to move, needs to perform physical tasks. This stays. Parts of the motor cortex. For voluntary movement, for responding to commands, for translating instruction into action. Language processing centers. Reduced capacity. Just enough to understand simple commands. Move. Stop. Activate. Nothing complex. No grammar. No nuance. Just basic comprehension. And fragments of sensory processing. Enough to see, hear, feel. Whatever senses the servitor needs for its function. But processed without interpretation. Without meaning beyond immediate utility. The result is a brain that functions at the level of a simple machine. Input, command, process, execute command, output, action. No thought between input and output. No consideration, no choice, just automatic response. The person who existed before is gone. Not dead. Death would be mercy, just erased. Functionally destroyed while the body continues living. The ultimate violation. More complete than death because something survives to experience the emptiness. The lobotomization takes between 4 and 8 hours depending on complexity. When it's complete, the tech priests seal the skull. Replace the bone section removed by the drill. Use surgical adhesive and mechanical fasteners. The subject will have a scar, a mark, physical evidence of what was done. But they won't remember it happening. Won't remember anything. Won't have the capacity to form memories of this experience even though they were conscious throughout. That might be the worst part. Experiencing your own mind being destroyed. Your identity being erased. Your humanity being stripped away. And then not even being able to remember that it happened. Body modification follows immediately, while the subject is still on the table. Still paralyzed. Still unable to respond. The surgical team begins installing augmentations. Depends on the servitor's assigned function. A labor servitor gets enhanced muscles, reinforced skeletal structure, joints replaced with more durable mechanical equivalents, hands modified or replaced with gripping tools. A gun servitor gets weapon mounts, arms removed, replaced with heavy weapon systems, bolters, heavy stubbers, multi-lasers. Whatever the Mechanicus needs, the weapon becomes the servitor's body. Inseparable, permanent. A tech servitor gets specialized tools, welding equipment, cutting lasers, diagnostic sensors, built directly into the body, replacing natural limbs, creating something that's more tool than person. Some servitors are barely recognizable as human afterward, more machine than flesh. Only the head and torso remain organic. Everything else replaced. The person reduced to a biological processor for mechanical components. The augmentations are crude compared to what tech priests receive. Tech priests augment themselves carefully, gradually, preserving their humanity while enhancing their capabilities, maintaining their identity throughout the process. Servitor augmentation is industrial, fast, efficient. No concern for aesthetics or comfort or the subject's experience. Just functional improvement, making the body useful for its assigned purpose regardless of how that feels. Pain management is minimal. Servitors don't need to be comfortable. They need to work. Pain won't stop them from working because they lack the cognitive capacity to decide to stop. So the modifications happen with basic anesthetic. Enough to prevent shock. Enough to keep the body stable during surgery. Not enough to prevent suffering if the subject still had the capacity to suffer. But they don't. Not meaningfully. The lobotomization removed that. What remains might experience pain as sensation, but can't process it as suffering. Can't conceptualize it as something to avoid or fix or end. Neural interfaces are installed last. Ports in the skull. Direct connections to what remains of the brain. Allowing commands to be transmitted electronically rather than verbally. Faster. More precise. More reliable. Some servitors receive full command override systems, allowing a tech priest to take direct control, to puppet the servitor's body remotely, to use it as an extension of their own will. The servitor has no awareness of this. No sense that they're being controlled rather than acting independently. They just execute commands. Whether those commands come from their damaged brain processing verbal instructions or from a tech priest's neural interface doesn't matter. The distinction between autonomous action and remote control ceases to exist. The entire process from intake to completion takes 12 to 18 hours. A human enters the facility. A servitor exits. The transformation is complete, permanent, irreversible in any practical sense. The servitor is then assigned to duty. Immediately. No recovery period. No adjustment time. Just sent to wherever they're needed. Put to work. Used until they break. They'll work for years. Decades, potentially. Their modified bodies are durable, maintained like any other equipment, repaired when damaged, upgraded if necessary, kept functional until functionality becomes impossible. Then they're disposed of, bodies processed, useful components salvaged, organic material recycled, nothing wasted. The Omnisia's efficiency applied to every stage from conversion to disposal. The tech priests performing these conversions feel no guilt. Not because they're cruel. Not because they enjoy suffering. But because they've been taught that this is righteous. That servitor conversion is mercy. That giving a criminal or debtor or dissident a chance to serve is better than simply killing them. They believe this. Genuinely. Have integrated it into their understanding of the universe. Servitor conversion isn't a horror. It's redemption. Transformation, making something useless useful, extracting value from waste. The fact that the waste used to be a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams doesn't factor into the calculation. Because people are just biological machines. And machines can be repurposed, optimized, made to serve. This is the Mechanicus's worldview. Everything is machine. Everything can be improved through modification. Everything exists to serve the Omnisia's purposes. Servitor conversion is just applied philosophy. The logical extension of believing that flesh is weak and machine is strong, and combining the two produces something better than either alone. Except it doesn't produce something better. Produces something diminished. Something that's lost everything valuable about being human while gaining only the ability to function as biological machinery. But the Mechanicus doesn't see it that way. And the Imperium doesn't question them, because the Imperium needs servitors, needs the labor they provide, needs the economic model that makes their use profitable. So the conversion continues. The factories keep processing. The quotas keep being filled. And millions of humans keep having their minds destroyed so their bodies can serve. Let me show you what they're used for. The full scope of how servitors enable Imperial infrastructure. Why the system can't function without them. Servitors are everywhere. Once you know what to look for, you see them constantly. In every Imperial facility, every forge world, every hive, every ship, everywhere. Their background, part of the environment, like furniture or equipment. Nobody notices them unless they malfunction. Nobody thinks about what they are, what they used to be. Let me show you the scale. Manufacturing is the obvious application. Forge worlds run on servitors. Millions of them, maybe billions on the largest worlds. Operating machinery, moving materials, performing assembly tasks. Every repetitive function that doesn't require judgment or adaptation. A typical manufactorum has dozens of servitors per production line, standing at stations, performing the same action repeatedly, for 18 hours, 20 hours, however long the shift runs, never stopping, never slowing, never complaining about conditions or demanding breaks. They're more efficient than human workers. Don't get tired the same way. Don't make mistakes from boredom or distraction. Don't require training because the training is built into their lobotomization. They know their task. That's all they know. That's all they need to know. And they're cheaper than human workers over time. No wages, no benefits, no housing except minimal charging stations. Just maintenance, fuel, repairs when damaged. The economics favor servitors overwhelmingly. This is why Forge worlds can maintain the production quotas they do. Why they can operate continuously. Why they never face labor shortages or strikes or any of the complications that come with human workers. Servitors solve all of those problems, at the cost of millions of lobotomized humans. But the Mechanicus considers that cost acceptable. Military applications are extensive. Gun servitors serve in Imperial Guard regiments. Mobile weapon platforms, cheaper than proper vehicles, more expendable than soldiers, placed in defensive positions where high casualties are expected. They don't retreat, can't retreat, don't have the cognitive capacity to decide that retreat is necessary. They stand and fire until destroyed or until they run out of ammunition or until someone gives them a direct command to move. This makes them valuable for holding positions, for creating kill zones, for providing suppressing fire while actual soldiers maneuver. They're not frontline troops. They're area denial weapons, living turrets. And when they're destroyed, no morale impact, no grieving families, no psychological trauma to other soldiers, just equipment loss, replaceable, already written off in the logistics calculations. Naval servitors crew Imperial ships, thousands per vessel, maybe tens of thousands on the largest ships, operating secondary systems, monitoring equipment, performing manual labor, loading ordnance, maintaining life support. They're essential for ship operation, not in the sense of being irreplaceable, but in the sense that without them you'd need vastly more human crew, more space for quarters, more food, more complexity in management. Servitors allow ships to operate with smaller human crews, more efficient, more sustainable on long voyages, more economical. The Imperial Navy depends on servitors as much as the Mechanicus does. Administrative servitors are everywhere in the administratum. They process data, sort documents, maintain archives, operate calculating engines. All the repetitive information management tasks that the Imperium's bureaucracy generates. An administratum office might have dozens of administrative servitors, working continuously, processing paperwork that human clerks would take months to complete, never making errors, never losing documents, never questioning whether the work matters. They're particularly useful for tasks requiring precision without judgment. Sorting, categorizing, recording, calculating, things that need to be done correctly but don't need to be understood. A human clerk might question why they're filing reports nobody will read, might get demoralized, might make errors from frustration. A servitor just files, forever, without concern for meaning or purpose. Medical servitors assist in medici facilities, not performing surgery, not making diagnoses, but handling routine tasks, monitoring patients, administering prescribed treatments, changing bandages, operating basic equipment. They free human medical personnel for more complex work. Allow a single doctor to manage more patients. Make medical care more scalable, more efficient. The irony is lost on everyone involved. Medical servitors caring for patients, helping them recover, restoring their health, while being themselves the victims of the most profound medical violation imaginable. But nobody thinks about that. The servitors don't think about it because they can't. The doctors don't think about it because it's normalized. The patients don't think about it because they're focused on their own suffering. Domestic servitors serve the wealthy, noble households, high-ranking imperial officials, anyone with sufficient status. They have personal servitors, cleaning, cooking, carrying, performing all the household tasks that the wealthy consider beneath them. These servitors are usually less modified than industrial ones, still look mostly human, still have their original limbs, just lobotomized, just reduced to biological servants. The wealthy prefer this, want their servants to look human, to maintain the aesthetic, to preserve the appearance of having human staff without the complications of actual humans. A human servant might gossip, might steal, might have opinions about their employers, might quit, might do any number of things that make them unreliable. A servitor does none of these things. Perfect servant, absolutely loyal, incapable of judgment or betrayal or independent action. And if you're wealthy enough, you don't think about what that servitor used to be. Don't consider that they might have been someone's parent, someone's child, someone's friend, someone. You just see efficient service, convenience, status symbol. The servitor is furniture that moves. Ecclesiastical servitors serve the imperial cult. Cathedrals have them, maintaining the buildings, operating the infrastructure, performing tasks that keep the holy spaces functional. Some are specialized. Choir servitors, their vocal cords modified, their remaining brain function dedicated to producing specific sounds. They sing in cathedral choirs, producing hymns, never deviating from the programmed melodies. They're not actually worshiping, not singing from devotion or faith, just producing sounds, mechanical, programmed. But the congregation doesn't know that, doesn't see the difference between genuine worship and programmed vocalization. Confession servitors listen to sins, record them, store them in data banks, speak programmed absolutions. They're not priests, can't provide actual spiritual guidance, just record-keeping mechanisms shaped like humans. But they serve a purpose. Allow the ecclesiarchy to track confessions, monitor populations, identify potential heretics through patterns in admitted sins. Religion as surveillance, servitors as tools. Penal servitors are punishment in themselves. Criminals sentenced to servitor conversion, but assigned to particularly dangerous or degrading functions. Sent into radioactive zones, toxic environments, combat zones with zero survival expectation. They're expendable even by servitor standards. Used up, burned through, destroyed intentionally in service that kills them within months or years. This is presented as justice. The criminal serving humanity through their sacrifice, redeeming themselves through useful death, the Imperium extracting value from them until there's nothing left to extract, and then processing their bodies for whatever components can be salvaged. Nothing wasted. Efficiency to the end. Specialized servitors exist for nearly every function. Astropathic servitors. Psychers who failed to become full astropaths. Converted. Their psychic abilities reduced but still present. Used for short-range telepathic communication. Living Vox systems. Navigator servitors. Failed navigators. Those who couldn't handle warp navigation but still have some perception of the immaterium. Used for warp detection. Monitoring for demon presence. Psychic early warning systems. Cherubs. Not servitors in the standard sense, but close. Deceased infants. Bodies preserved and augmented. Used as messenger drones. Flying between levels in hives or ships. Carrying messages and small items. The Imperium calls these angelic. Blessed. Sacred innocents serving the Emperor in death as they couldn't in life. The reality is they're dead babies turned into biological drones. But nobody questions it because nobody wants to think about it too deeply. The scale becomes clear when you calculate the numbers. Every Forge world needs millions of servitors. There are thousands of Forge worlds. That's billions just in manufacturing. Every Imperial Guard regiment uses servitors. There are millions of regiments, tens of billions of soldiers, each supported by servitors. That's billions more. Every Imperial Navy vessel uses servitors. Thousands of ships, each requiring thousands of servitors. That's more billions. The administratum, the ecclesiarchy, noble households, planetary governments, every imperial institution, all using servitors extensively. Add it all together and you get a number that's almost incomprehensible. Trillions, maybe tens of trillions, of servitors, operating across the Imperium. Right now, all of them used to be human. All of them were converted, lobotomized, modified, transformed into biological machinery. The scale is so massive that individual conversions become invisible. When you're processing millions of humans annually, when you've been doing it for 10,000 years, each individual case stops matching, becomes just another unit in the production statistics. And the Imperium depends on this. Remove the servitors and imperial infrastructure collapses. Manufacturing grinds to a halt. Ships can't crew properly. Administrative work backs up beyond any human capacity to process. Military operations lose their logistics foundation. The Imperium isn't built to function without servitors. Can't function without them. Has structured itself around their availability. Has made them essential to every major institution. This creates a system where the horror is necessary. Where questioning servitor conversion means questioning the entire imperial economic model. Where stopping the practice would require restructuring society so fundamentally that it's easier to just accept the horror and move on. The Mechanicus justifies this through theology. The Omnia wastes nothing. Every resource must be utilized. Every human body is a resource. Converting criminals and debtors and dissidents into servitors is optimal resource allocation. The weak flesh is made strong through augmentation. The failures of humanity are corrected through mechanical enhancement. Servitors are improvements. Humans perfected through the removal of everything that makes humans imperfect. Emotion is weakness. Individuality is inefficiency. Free will is unreliability. Servitors eliminate all of these problems. They're what humans should be. What humans could be if they just embrace the Omnia as truth. This isn't just propaganda. The tech priests believe it, have integrated it into their worldview so completely that they can't see the horror anymore. Can't recognize that they're systematically destroying millions of minds to create slaves. They see optimization, improvement, the natural evolution of humanity toward its machine destiny. And nobody with power challenges this, because challenging it would require offering alternatives. Ways to maintain imperial productivity without servitors. Ways to crew ships and operate manufactorums and process administrative paperwork using human labor. Those alternatives exist. Theoretically, you could pay workers, train them, treat them well enough that they'd work willingly. Invest in automation that doesn't require lobotomized humans. But that costs more, takes time, requires long-term thinking and investment, demands treating humans as valuable rather than expendable. The Imperium doesn't do any of that. Can't do it. Won't do it. Because the short-term economic calculation favors servitors overwhelmingly. So the system continues. The conversions continue. The justifications continue. And trillions of servitors keep working across the Imperium. Keep serving. Keep existing in their diminished state. Forever. Or until something breaks the system. Until the supply of humans can't meet the demand for servitors. Until the economic model collapses under its own weight. Until someone with sufficient power decides that maybe enslaving minds for efficiency isn't actually acceptable. But that breaking point hasn't arrived. And the Imperium has structured itself to ensure it never will. Let me show you why the system can't stop. Why even acknowledging the horror would threaten imperial stability. Why servitor conversion will continue until the Imperium itself ends. The High Lords of Terra know what servitors are. Know how they're made. Know the scale of the conversion. Know that trillions of humans have been lobotomized to serve imperial infrastructure. They know. And they approve. Not because they're evil. Not because they enjoy suffering. But because they've done the math. And the math says the Imperium can't function without servitors. Let me show you that math. Start with manufacturing. The Imperium needs to produce weapons. Constantly. Billions of lost guns. Millions of vehicles. Thousands of ships. The war machine consumes equipment faster than anything except bodies. Current production relies on servitors. They operate the manufactorums, run the assembly lines, maintain the equipment. Without them, production drops by maybe 70%. Maybe more. You could replace them with human workers. But humans require wages, housing, food beyond basic nutrient paste, healthcare, rest, time off, all the things servitors don't need. The cost increases by a factor of 5. Minimum, maybe 10 depending on the world and the industry. That's not just money. That's resources, materials, food production, infrastructure. All of it has to be diverted to support workers instead of supporting the military. And production still drops. Because humans work 8-hour shifts, need breaks, make mistakes when tired, get sick, have opinions about working conditions and occasionally strike. Servitors work until they collapse. Don't need breaks. Don't make mistakes from fatigue because they don't experience fatigue the same way. Never strike because they can't conceptualize collective action. Replace servitors with humans and the Imperium's manufacturing capacity falls to maybe 40% of current levels. At 5 times the cost. And that 40% is less reliable. More subject to disruption. The Imperium can't afford that. Can't fight its wars with 40% of its current equipment. Can't maintain its territory. Can't defend against the threats that actually exist. So servitors remain necessary. Not ideal. Not desirable. Just necessary. The alternative is imperial collapse within decades. The military dependency is even worse. The Imperial Navy operates thousands of capital ships. Each one requires thousands of servitors. Minimum. Just to function. Not optimally. Just to keep the basic systems running. Replace those servitors with human crew and you need 5 times as many people. Maybe 10 times depending on the ship size and complexity. That means larger crew quarters. More life support. More food. More everything. Ships become more expensive to build. More expensive to operate. More expensive to maintain. The Navy's budget increases massively while its effective fleet size decreases because you can't afford to operate as many ships. And you still have reduced capability. Because human crew need sleep. Need rest periods. Need to rotate duties. A ship with servitors can operate continuously. A ship with only human crew needs to cycle personnel. Reduce operational tempo. Accept limitations. The Navy can't function at current capacity without servitors. Can't protect as many systems. Can't respond to as many threats. Can't maintain the void superiority that keeps the Imperium from being carved up by Xenos and chaos. So servitors remain. Because the alternative is losing space. And losing space means losing worlds. And losing worlds means the Imperium shrinks until something kills it. The Administratum is the least obvious dependency but maybe the most critical. The Imperium runs on paperwork. Reports. Records. Calculations. Data processing. All the information management that coordinates a million-world empire. The current system uses billions of administrative servitors. They process data faster than human clerks. Never make transcription errors. Work continuously without breaks. Handle the massive information flow that keeps the Imperium functioning. Replace them with human clerks and the Administratum needs 10 times as many people. Maybe 20 times. And the processing time increases dramatically. Reports that currently take days to process now take months. Decisions that take weeks now take years. The Imperium is already painfully slow. Already struggles with information lag. Already makes decisions based on outdated data because communication and processing take so long. Remove servitors and it gets worse. Much worse. The Administratum bogs down entirely. Grinds to a near halt. The Imperium's coordination collapses because the bureaucracy can't process information fast enough to respond to anything. And what happens when the administratum stops functioning? When reports don't get filed and requests don't get processed and resources don't get allocated. Imperial worlds starve. Military units run out of supplies. Defenses crumble because nobody processed the request for reinforcements. The Imperium fragments into isolated systems that can't coordinate with each other. Servitors prevent this. Keep the information flowing. Keep the bureaucracy functioning. Keep the Imperium minimally coordinated. They're not optional. They're the foundation of imperial administration. Remove them and the entire system collapses. The economic model is built on servitor efficiency. The Imperium doesn't have a surplus economy, doesn't have excess capacity. Everything operates at or beyond sustainable limits. Every resource is already allocated. Every world is already extracting maximum production from its population. Servitors allow this. They provide labor without requiring the resources that human labor requires. They're net contributors. They add productive capacity without adding consumption demands. Humans consume as much as they produce. Maybe more. You have to feed them, house them, provide healthcare, support their families. All of that takes resources that could otherwise go to the military or infrastructure or other priorities. Servitors consume almost nothing. Nutrient paste, basic maintenance, power, all much cheaper than supporting human workers. Their positive return on investment from day one. The Imperium's economy depends on this. Depends on having a labor force that contributes without consuming. That produces without demanding. That works without requiring the investment that makes human labor barely economically viable. Switch to human labor and the economy contracts. Immediately, dramatically, resources that currently support the military now support workers. Production that currently goes to equipment now goes to maintaining workforce infrastructure. The Imperium becomes poorer, weaker, less capable of defending itself. And that weakness invites attack from every enemy waiting for signs of imperial decline. Servitors aren't just convenient. They're economically mandatory. The math doesn't work without them. The Imperium can't maintain its current scale and capacity using only human labor. So the conversions continue, because stopping means economic collapse. And economic collapse means military collapse. And military collapse means extinction. The Mechanicus has its own dependencies. The Adeptus Mechanicus isn't just using servitors. It's built around them, organized around them, structured to extract maximum utility from lobotomized labor. Forge worlds are designed for servitor operation. The factories, the infrastructure, the production processes, all optimized for workers who don't need rest or safety equipment or any accommodation for human limitations. Switching to human workers would require redesigning everything. Rebuilding facilities, restructuring production lines, installing safety systems, creating living spaces, all of it expensive and time-consuming. The Mechanicus would resist this, not just because of cost, but because it contradicts their theology. Their entire worldview is built on the superiority of machine over flesh, on the weakness of pure humanity compared to augmented humanity. Servitors prove this theology. Show that humans are better when their weakest parts, emotion, free will, individual consciousness, are removed. That functionality improves when humanity is reduced to its mechanical essence. Abandoning servitors means abandoning that proof. Admitting that maybe pure humanity isn't inferior. That maybe consciousness and emotion and free will have value. That maybe the Mechanicus's philosophy is wrong. The tech priests can't make that admission. Their entire identity is built on the belief that they're improving themselves through augmentation. That they're becoming better by becoming less human. If servitors are wrong, if lobotomizing humans to make them functional is horrific rather than optimal, then what does that say about the tech priests' own augmentations? About their own transformation? About their own rejection of humanity? Questions everything. Undermines the foundation of the cult Mechanicus. Makes 10,000 years of theological development seem like justification for atrocity rather than enlightenment. So the Mechanicus will never stop creating servitors. Can't stop without destroying itself philosophically. The practice is too embedded in their worldview to question. Reform is structurally impossible. You can't gradually reduce servitor use. Can't slowly transition to human labor. Because the dependencies are system-wide, interconnected. Remove servitors from one area and the problems cascade everywhere else. Stop using servitors in manufacturing and production drops and the military suffers and worlds fall to enemies and the Imperium loses territory. The pain is immediate and catastrophic. The benefits of moral clarity are abstract and distant. The Imperium doesn't make decisions based on long-term ethics. It makes decisions based on immediate survival. And immediate survival requires servitors. Any reformer who suggests ending servitor conversion would be removed from power. Immediately, by colleagues who understand that the suggestion threatens imperial survival. Not because they love servitors, but because they know the alternative is worse. This creates a system where the horror is locked in. Where even people who recognize the horror can't stop it without causing greater harm. Where the only moral choice is the immoral one because all alternatives lead to collapse. The Imperium has no path forward that doesn't include servitors. Technological improvement might help. Theoretically, if the Mechanicus developed better automation, more sophisticated machine intelligence, systems that could replace servitors without requiring lobotomized humans. But the Mechanicus doesn't innovate, doesn't develop new technology, just maintains what exists. And what exists requires servitors because servitors were part of the original design. You could try to recover Dark Age technology. Find STC systems that provided alternatives. But even if you found them, even if you could manufacture them, the transition would take centuries. And the Imperium doesn't have centuries to restructure its entire economy. So improvement is theoretical, possible in some distant future, but not practical, not actionable. Not something that changes the current reality. And current reality requires servitors. Will require them tomorrow, and the day after, and for the foreseeable future until something fundamental changes about imperial capacity or imperial needs. The horrible truth is that everyone's right. The reformers are right. Servitor conversion is an atrocity. Systematic, widespread, unjustifiable by any moral framework that values human consciousness and dignity. And the pragmatists are right. The Imperium can't function without servitors. Can't maintain its current scale. Can't fight its wars. Can't survive in its current form. Both things are true simultaneously. And resolving that contradiction would require rebuilding the Imperium from the ground up. Restructuring its economy. Rethinking its priorities. Accepting reduced capacity and increased vulnerability during the transition. Nobody with power wants to do that. Nobody wants to be the administrator who presided over imperial contraction, who accepted defeat in order to be more ethical, who chose moral clarity over practical survival. So they choose survival, accept the horror, justify it however they can, and continue feeding millions of humans into the conversion facilities. Because the alternative is watching the Imperium crumble. And nobody who spent their life serving the Imperium can accept that. Can't choose abstract ethics over concrete survival. Even when survival requires ongoing atrocity. General Cove became Servitor Unit 7743 Gamma. Works the manufacturing floor where he once supervised. Stands for 18 hours a day. Monitors production. Reports deviations. Never thinks about who he was, never remembers his family, never experiences anything beyond immediate function. Is this better than death? The Mechanicus says yes, says he's serving, contributing, redeeming his failure through useful labor. Is it worse than death? Maybe. Existing without experiencing existence. Consciousness reduced to bare function. The person erased while the body continues. We can't know. Cove can't tell us. Can't evaluate his own state. Can't even form the thought that evaluation is possible. He just works. Like billions of servitors across the Imperium. Like trillions who came before him. Like millions who'll come after. Forever. or until the Imperium finally collapses and the horror can end because there's nobody left to perpetuate it. Until then, the conversions continue. The quotas are met. The servitors are deployed. And the Imperium maintains its comfortable fiction that this is acceptable. Necessary. The only way humanity can survive. Maybe they're right. Maybe servitors are necessary. Maybe the math really doesn't work without them. Maybe choosing to end the horror would doom billions to death or worse. Or maybe the Imperium has trapped itself in a system where horror becomes necessary because it's refused to imagine alternatives. Where atrocity is unavoidable because it's built the foundation on atrocity and can't rebuild without collapsing. Either way, the result is the same. Millions of humans converted annually. Minds destroyed. Bodies repurposed. Consciousness enslaved. Also, the Imperium can function. Also, humanity can survive. Also, the war machine can keep grinding forward. The Adeptus Mechanicus enslaves human minds for war. And the Imperium allows it, requires it, depends on it. That's the horror. Not that it happens, but that it has to happen. That stopping would be worse. That the only moral choice is to accept the immoral reality. Welcome to Warhammer 40k. Where even trying to do the right thing might doom humanity. Where the only path forward is paved with lobotomized minds. And nobody with power can afford to look too closely at what they're walking on. If you made it through all of this, you understand something most people miss about the Imperium. It's not cruel because it's evil. It's cruel because it's trapped. Built a system so dependent on horror that stopping the horror means collapse. Servitors aren't an accident, aren't a mistake. They're the foundation, the economic model, the labor force that makes everything else possible. And every single one used to be human. 3 things before you go. First, hit the like button. This kind of systematic analysis, examining how the Imperium actually functions beneath the battles, needs engagement. The algorithm measures signals. Your like tells it this content matters. Second, leave a comment answering this. Do you think the Imperium could function without servitors? Or is the horror genuinely necessary for Imperial survival? I want to know if you think there's a path forward that doesn't require enslaving minds. Third, subscribe if you want more content that examines the machinery beneath the spectacle, that asks how the Imperium maintains itself, that looks at the costs nobody wants to calculate. The Adeptus Mechanicus enslaves human minds for war, not because they're evil, because the Imperium needs it, because the alternative is worse. And that might be the most horrifying thing of all. Thanks for watching. The servitors are still working, and they always will be.